What about Postman would they change, to make it better? I think one of the biggest challenges designing a product for developers is,
From your perspective, for let's say senior product designer, what should be the responsibility, what should be the expectations for that role?
using the product like a developer would. What we do for active onboarding on like the design team. Wherever we have managed to get customer interactions on like these public forums, those have been some of like the fastest feedback loops. We want you to be able to think business strategy, take a small problem and like recreate and try three different ways of solving it.
What are the advantages that you have seen being with Postman for so long?
The first thing we ask people to do is
Welcome to another episode. Today I'm thrilled to host Vineet Kumar, a former director of UX at Postman, a globally loved developer tool. Vineet is a seasoned design leader working at Postman for nearly a decade and managing 24 amazing designers team. Vineet has played a pivotal role into shaping Postman's design practices, helping bridge the gap between users' empathy and a tool while driving product innovation. During his impressive tenure, Vineet has been instrumental in building API collaboration platform for the future, contributing to Postman's growth from 500k to 30 million signed up users. In this episode, we'll explore how Postman balances users' empathy with analytics, design team rituals that foster collaboration, onboarding processes that set new hires up for the success, senior level responsibilities and expectations, the benefits of long-term tenure in a single role, and how technical knowledge empowers designers. If you are passionate about designing for technical product or curious about building a tool that resonates with users at scale, this conversation is must listen. Vineet shares not only his journey but also actionable insights to help you design with purpose and impact. Don't forget to follow and subscribe on your favorite podcasting app and YouTube. Your support fuels more inspiring conversation with industry leaders. Let's dive in and learn from Vineet. Hey Vineet, thanks for joining today. It's pleasure having you.
hey Darshan, good to be here.
Great. So first of all, Vineet, it's really pleasure having you here on this conversation because the kind of a product the Postman has, right? Is it different than all the other product in consumer market on the business market that all the designers get chance to work on? And specifically because of that, I am really excited to have the conversation on. Let's start with something very basic, right? When it comes to the design team in the Postman particularly. So not all the team will be following the same processes, same rituals and everything to carry out the final product. Everyone will have their curated framework and
Yeah.
processes, right? But when it comes to the product like Postman, right? It's a tech product in the first place, right? And which is not just limited to one niche or one domain particularly, but it's catering to the all the tech people out there, right? So it's a big diversity in the product itself. So how does a design team at a Postman prioritize the empathy for the users in the setting of the design process for each project that you guys are working on?
Is definitely a hard challenge. I think first and foremost, like we all need to acknowledge that some of our designers might have been developers in their past lives. They're familiar with some form of software development in one way or the other.
Right.
But at the end of the day, you are not the target persona for Postman. You're not the IC developer sitting with Postman open 8 hours a week, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And you're not the persona whose success at their job depends on like products like Postman. And I think with that acknowledgement, we've been able to try out different methods just to get a better sense of like what developers really want from a product like Postman.
What's the day of developer look like
Exactly,
with the product,
100%.
let's say?
We obviously really value any kind of interaction time we get with customers. I think I'll maybe go through them in the order of scale. Probably our biggest forums for having conversations with our users is probably through our public communities on GitHub, on Discourse, Twitter. I think these are communities that we have spent years trying to nurture, and hopefully, we've built a relationship where the community is open enough to really
Share
be
the feedback.
vocal about how
Yeah.
much they love or hate Postman, and what about Postman would they change to make it better. And it's also receptive to us pitching in there saying, hey, here's an idea, guys. I don't know if it'll solve your problem, but I'd love for you to try out a prototype, try out like a beta track, and just get a sense of,
Right.
does this solve your problem? Does this solve your pain point?
Hmm.
Um, Wherever we have managed to get customer interactions on like these public forums, those have been some of like the fastest feedback loops that we have ever gotten in our product development lifecycle.
Absolutely.
The second, and this is slightly more ad hoc, but something I really encourage all the designers to do, is seek out communities in which developers actually are, but Postman might not have a presence. Reddit is like a great place. You get a lot of interesting, software development and programming subreddits. And even if you're not actively engaging or like posting on behalf of Postman,
Hmm.
I think there's a lot to learn about the perspective of a developer, the kind of tools they use, what they appreciate in the kind of tools they use, and what they need to be successful at their job from like the conversations on these communities as well. We do a significant amount of direct user outreach as well. Typically, contextually, when users face a certain kind of difficulty in like the app, in the product,
Hmm.
we might reach out and say, "Hey, we saw you struggling with this. We'd love to have a conversation and get a better sense of what you were trying to do." Sometimes this is initiated by the user. They might write in, at help@postman.com, or they might write into us at Twitter saying, "Found a bug. That's odd. Didn't expect it," etc.
Right.
And that follows up into 30-minute 1 hour conversation where we can really get the opportunity to deep dive, understand that user's perspective, get a better sense of like their real world job that they're responsible for, and how Postman contributes to its success. On top of all of this, we do our own qualitative research as well.
Hmm.
This might be either directly through cohorts of users that we are seeing perform a certain kind of activity or like face a certain kind of issue in the product. It might be through other tooling that we have, like usertesting.com or userology, or any other usability
Yeah.
testing website. These, at the end of the day, are just quick validation loops. You have an idea, you prototype it really quickly, you get a sense of like how a developer would go through that experience,
Hmm.
and that gives you some quick conviction before you go into a conversation with product and engineering stakeholders, before you decide something's on the roadmap, that hey, this is a problem worth solving, this is a solution that might work, right?
Right.
I would never take it as true validation that this is the right thing to build, etc., but these are just like soft signals to get a
Hmm.
sense of like what you're building for.
But is there a
um
proper validation process considering that the both the framework that you said, right, has a very open-ended insights coming in,
yeah,
right? So is there any validation process at a product level, at a design team level
yeah,
set for the team
yeah,
so that you get a sense of, what exactly needs to be built before
yeah.
you really move forward?
I think any process slash framework you have on top of any kind of usability testing is not foolproof. There is
Hmm.
going to be some amount of subjectivity to it, and it's better that we are all acutely aware so that we can see when we're getting the wrong signals in some sense. But we do have some things that hopefully make the lives of our designers a bit easier. Number one, we look at task success a lot. All our usability tests are, at the end of the day, oriented around a real world job that a user is trying to do.
Right.
We have the user use the product to do that job, and we get a sense of like, were they able to complete that job or not.
Hmm.
That's a pretty binary metric, but I think at scale it can give you a good sense of like, is something very fundamentally wrong in the experience
Correct.
that we're building. If 20% of like users you tested it against, out of 100, did not manage to complete the task, there's no way you're even entertaining this solution at the end of the day,
At this
right?
scale.
Yeah. So we look at like task success to be almost 100% before you gain any conviction. On top of task success, there are slightly more subjective metrics like time to complete a task, or the amount of like confusion points that like a user hit before they completed the task, etc.
Can you give a bit of examples on the
100%. So, like, confusion point would be I saw, three possible actions. I know what I want to do, but I didn't really understand which action I need to take to complete, my intent.
right,
I'm going to try one, it fails. Sure. I'm going to go to the next one, I'm going to fail. And then I'm going to try the third one.
hmm,
They still completed the task because, uh,
right,
all users, they found a sandbox, they played around, they tried, tested, failed, and then they moved on. But they encountered significant difficulty, which could be a comprehension problem, it could be a usability problem, it could be an intuition problem, like whatever. But like there is a problem at the end of the day that we need to dig deeper into. Um, so there are a few like metrics like this that just help us standardize how we do some amount of usability testing across the organization.
makes
Um,
sense.
I think going back to your original question, I just want to round it off with like one last way we sort of uh, m- the design team specifically engages with the community, which might seem interesting from a developer tooling perspective. We actually conduct our own workshops now. So the idea is that each design team, um, they're looking at an end-to-end user journey. They have a certain problem that they're solving for users, and they conduct their own workshops around like how Postman helps you solve it
Independently.
independently. We might
Awesome.
loop in developers like from the team to give a talk about like a more nuanced developer topic, etc., or like
Right.
run a specific session in the workshop. But we are the ones conducting it. You'll probably find designers walking the aisles, when people have like questions, answering those questions. We might not have all the answers. Postman is a developer product at the end of the day, but I think
Correct.
it's important for our design team to be there on the ground, understand and get a sense of like the kind of like small frustrations and like questions that just keep popping up at scale when we conduct a workshop with like 50 to 100 people.
Hmm.
And like the more frequently we do it, the more I think grounded we are in like the kind of
So
like basic stuff that can go wrong in like the product development life cycle. um I think all of these activities at the end of the day is done with the assumption that you are thinking from a persona perspective. You are able
hmm,
to categorize all of this qualitative feedback that you're getting into your knowledge about the personas that your product serves.
right,
You are thinking about it from a market segmentation perspective. When you do a workshop and 80% of like the people that come up are like hobbyist developers, for example,
true.
you cannot interpret their jobs and their failings onto like the enterprise segment and expect it to work, right?
Right.
So all of these user interaction touch points and like any forum that we use to gain empathy needs to feed back into our understanding of like individual personas as well as like the market segments in which they work at the end of the day. And I think with all of this, I feel confident that like if a designer in our team is engaging, participating in a lot of these things, along with trying out the product themselves, maybe using it for like a couple of like hobby projects that they might have, they
Right.
have a pretty good sense of like what customers value in like a tool like Postman.
And
So
might
yeah.
be what are the challenges that comes through while
Yes,
using the
100%.
product. Since you said about the workshop kind of arrangement at a Postman,
Yeah.
right? And that is, I believe, the good initiative and which is very unique in nature as well for the developer first product like a Postman, right? But I believe that will not be just limited to that workshop.
Hmm.
What are the other rituals of a design team really helps educate a design team entirely and also evaluate the problem statement better in a way?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, as you said, it's a developer first product, right? Developer product. So how you enable a design team so that they understand the problem statement better and
Yeah.
work upon it? So what are
100%.
the rituals and processes that you set for it?
I think we have very broadly three kinds of rituals that the design team participates in. One
Okay.
set of rituals, and we talked about a couple of these already in the last question, is around getting to know your customers better, right?
Hmm.
These could be workshops that you're participating in. These could be like a weekly meeting where we go through new GitHub or Discourse tickets that sort of like came across.
So
With
entire design team is doing this entire
Yeah,
exercise?
pretty much. And
Okay.
not as a triaging exercise. The objective there is to not go solve that problem necessarily, but first and foremost,
Address.
yeah, to be able to understand and really, get a feel for what like the user is trying to do,
Mhm.
where they're struggling, and possibly also find opportunities for reaching out to them and engaging them in the community. We do rituals like a monthly customer voice report where we highlight some of our um, mm, enterprise or professional customers who really use Postman in unique and interesting ways and are really leveraging the collaborative power of a product like Postman. So these would be consolidated into like decks that we can distribute across the organization, across like product
Okay.
and like marketing as well. Sales and GTM's teams probably do their own, but I think we try to look at it from like a very specific UX and like user journey lens.
And even apart from a tech team, every single vertical needs to know the product
Yeah,
at the
yeah,
end, right?
absolutely,
So yeah,
100%.
makes sense.
Yeah, so that's the first bucket of like rituals that like most of our team participates in. I think the second bucket of rituals that we participate in is around getting to know the rest of the team better. What are the things that help us get to know each other's strengths, what everyone's working on, find synergies, collaborate between designers, between designers of one team and like engineers of another team, etc., etc. For example, we do a ritual called This Month in Design, where
Okay.
the idea is like everyone on the team just takes 5 minutes to write one slide in a deck about like the things that you worked on and the kind of user impact that they're creating. We consolidate it into like we consolidate all the inputs from the designers across the entire organization, and what you get is everything that's happening across the organization, a snapshot of it for like the last month. And it might seem
Awesome.
very like pedantic, like just it's a demo day of sorts at the end of the day.
Yeah,
But I think the artifact that we have managed to create at the end of the day is something that we can distribute across the organization, gets a lot of visibility from like teams that we don't necessarily get an opportunity to collaborate with sometimes, gets a lot
absolutely.
of visibility from other functions like marketing and GTM, which might be slightly more, distant from. And interestingly enough, what's super powerful about it is being able to go a year and then look back at the last year in design. And
And every
I
single designer will have their own 12 slides, right?
yes, exactly. And honestly, like
Interesting.
I've been in Postman for 9 years now. I sometimes when I try to find like things I worked on my first year there, I really have to like search, right? If we had this ritual back then, like, life would have been so much easier. Um,
Absolutely.
but I think bottom line, like these are the kind of like rituals that just help us to know each other better, what everyone's working on, where our interests lie, where like how passionate are you about like certain kind of design problems, etc. And it's honestly found a lot of like opportunities for collaboration across
Hmm.
teams. Yeah,
I personally feel that will also uh, increase the motivation for the designer to create impact in the next coming month as well, right?
100%.
Because the visibility will be high across the organization for.
Yes. And what's even better is when someone receives feedback or uh, some kind of validation from like someone across
Appreciation,
the
let's say.
100% across the organization that they've never talked to. That really invigorates like the team to really put more thought and like effort into it at the end of the day. So it's been super super helpful.
Got
um
it.
the third bucket of rituals is things that we do to get to know our own functional specialty and craft better.
Okay.
So, as an example, one thing we do is craft Fridays. The idea is that like it's in person. Everyone's there. We do it remote as well, but like I think the energy is much better when everyone's in person. So everyone in the office, we just have like one big room. We get together for 2 hours on a Friday and we pick a very arbitrary problem statement like this week we're building Figma plugins. All the designers are building Figma plugins, obviously with some AI help, but um, it's a relatively alien space. Everyone might not have done it before, but we have one person who's taken the initiative and driving the entire thing. They've done the research. They probably have like a couple of steps. And we all get to understand like each other's perspectives on like certain nuances of their craft. We've done craft Fridays for storytelling. We have done craft Fridays for I think very very random visionary like design statements for
Will be
Postman.
not specific to Postman.
Yeah, need not be, absolutely not.
It can be anything.
Yes, 100%. I have no guardrails kept for Craft Fridays. The entire point was just get the team together, have fun working together, because there are very as the organization has scaled, and when you cross like the 20-member mark, it can become hard to find opportunities for the entire team to come together on like a
Right.
single problem at the end of the day.
And there might not be any single project which requires a 20 people team, let's say.
Yes, exactly, 100%. So I feel like that's been extremely valuable as well.
Makes sense.
All of these rituals, none of these are like my brainchild. Honestly, I couldn't have done it without the rest of the team and like my team of like design managers as well. Every one of them has contributed ideas. Each of these rituals has probably evolved and gone through multiple iterations to get where we are. But I think we never settle and say, yeah, that's enough, we'll just do this for the next 3 years. We're just like constantly questioning, okay, how can we do this better? How can we change this? How can we get closer to
Same
customers,
like a
etc.?
product.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I do think organizational design and like culture design is very very close to product design at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Conway's law, your
Even for that matter, design system, if you say, right?
yeah,
It's the same
100%.
product that is serving the another product, let's say.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Interesting. Since we have continued on the internal part of the Postman team, right? Postman design team.
Yeah.
But I feel these all rituals and the kind of a different principles that you guys are following, right, will not be really uh, easy for any other person who is coming to the team. Understandable, right? They might have a couple of other myths and things like that
Yeah.
before they coming into the team and joining
Yeah.
a team, let's say next month or next day or something like
Yeah.
that, right? But when they come in, they will have a completely different world altogether that
Yeah.
will open up.
Yeah.
But as a design team entirely, it's your job that you make that journey smooth for the new hires.
100%.
So is there any particular processes or some framework around it that really helps the new hires to smoothen the journey?
Yeah, I can shed some light on how we think about onboarding. Probably, two different kinds of onboarding that we do. There's very, very active onboarding that we look at for like your first 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, sort of like horizons. But there's also a lot of passive onboarding that's probably more relevant for like a 3 month, 6 month, 12 month, horizon. At, and I'll give you some examples to maybe like differentiate, right? Like at the end of the day, if you want to build trust in the organization, if you want to gain the trust of stakeholders, if you want to ship value, be able to have like the room and space to iterate on your initial ideas and like convictions, etc., that takes time, and
Absolutely.
honestly, it's all part of the onboarding process. In Postman, you're not onboarded until like you've shipped one thing and gotten yelled at once by someone on Twitter or like GitHub, and you've done something with that feedback as well at the end of the day, right? So there's some amount of that onboarding which is passive, but I'll also talk about like what we do for active onboarding on like the design team. First and foremost, we encourage, and for all practical purposes mandate, we've never had to enforce it, but like everyone does it, but uh, s- all new designers on the team to do what we call a first time user experience talk. I think one of the biggest challenges designing a product for developers is using the product like a developer would. So
Exactly.
the first thing we ask people to do is, get Postman, find a real world API use case. It can be a public API, but like find something you want to do with the GitHub, Slack, Twitter API yourself that would, be valuable for yourself. And use that scenario to get a taste for the product. Like, what does onboarding in the product look like? What does your first 5 minutes of like the product leave you? What kind of impression does it leave you? Where are like the points where you faced difficulties without any context of like historical decisions that we have taken? You're not biased by any of that, right?
Correct. Yeah.
um, this serves two functions. Like one, it's a very very quick crash course on like certain areas of like the product that you might take longer to explore in more nuanced detail.
Hmm.
But it at least is a conversation starter in a lot of places, right? um, New employees would publish this first time user experience talk, and in specific areas where they've let's say they faced any kind of difficulty, you might have designers from other teams pitching in and saying, that's interesting, didn't expect that, why do you feel that way, etc. And that begins a conversation which leads to further discovery and further understanding of like the product from there on.
Absolutely.
So all the entire intention of like that exercise is a, get you familiar with the product, or like get you to have any kind of conviction of your own on like what the kind of value the product provides, and b, become a conversation starter for further deep dives into the product at the end of the day.
Hmm.
um, the second thing we try and do is we actually have them build a production ready API. Yeah, so it can
Okay.
be very daunting. We don't expect you to necessarily understand a lot of things that you're doing, but we expect you to follow something step by step to get to a stage where you have a production ready API, just so that you can get a sense of like how complicated it is, how easy it is, where are the frustrations. We don't even mandate using Postman for it, for all practical purposes, right? Do you whatever tooling you want at the end of the day.
But
Um,
then my question is, if that's the case, right?
yeah,
Then is it always necessary to hire a new design team member who always have a some or the other tech background, or
not
that's not mandatory at all?
not necessary at all. Um, I'd like to think we have built a very diverse team. We have had folks who have software development backgrounds, and maybe they've been able to onboard faster, if anything. But
Hmm.
I also think it narrows their perspectives on like the kind of
Okay.
solutions that they want to like approach a certain problem with. So the real power happens when you bring someone with a developer background, bring someone without a developer background, bring someone with like something completely opposite, and get them solving like a real
One
world
problem.
developer problem, and see what kind of collaborative ideas sort of come
Hmm.
from that. So yeah, I think in the 8 week to 12-week horizon, we also encourage most designers to pick up one really simple, we call them UX fails. There's like one big Slack channel where like a lot of people just dump annoying
Uh-huh.
small things about the product that
They don't like
yeah,
it.
that they don't like. And we encourage like new people on the team to use a very, very simple UX fail as a way to build a relationship of trust with the rest of the team, the functional stakeholders that they're working with, their product manager, their engineers, etc., and see if we can get that on the roadmap and ship real world user value. And
Okay.
get that in like the first 3 months at the end of the day. I feel like getting some like shipping something in like your first 3 months is extremely rewarding, and really amplifies how quickly the rest of our journey in Postman sort of goes. So
Hmm.
we try and like get that done as quickly as as possible. On top of these, there are obviously all the different conversations you need to be having, all the different forums that you need to be part of, the people you need to be meeting,
Hmm.
the meetings you need to have, etc., etc. So I'm not going too deep into that, but I
But
think
is
like
there particular thing that is really helping a new hires to understand the tech space in the first place, and then they jump onto this all initiatives? Because as you said,
yeah,
right, there are diversity of a designers
yeah,
that are there in the team, right?
yeah,
So one who is coming from non-tech background,
yeah,
right, really needs to understand the
yeah,
tech domain first.
yeah. I do think that there is a certain level of understanding of software development that is almost mandatory for every designer, irrespective of whether you're working in Postman or not, right? You need to understand core concepts, fundamentals, some sense of like logic on top of which like basic programming sort of is done.
Yeah.
Um, that's something we almost like assess for at the end of the day, right?
Hmm.
And I'm pretty confident that even if you've never done software development in your life, you'll be able to grasp that logic really, really quickly.
Absolutely.
If you are familiar with those core concepts, for all practical purposes, APIs are a nice abstraction layer on top of real world software. So
Hmm.
we don't need you to get knee deep in, into software either. I think the part of software that I hate the most is like syntax and like getting pedantic about like some annoying issue that just like takes very long to fix. Luckily, we're in a day and age where like we have a lot of help, to not encounter these things, right? So especially with like AI agents and like assistants that are powering your software development, it can also accelerate like your learning of like a certain like code base, etc.
Hmm.
So I feel like none of there's no theoretical knowledge that's like a precursor anymore.
Okay.
And we've also, I think, invested a decent amount of time and effort in simplifying API and software development concepts to a place where everyone can understand it. So, for example,
Yeah.
our creative team, headed by Shruti Venkatesh, they've created a Postman comic. That's part of like something that we distribute to every candidate that we're talking to. It actually paints like Postman's like 5 to 10 year vision at the end of the day.
Okay.
And it's super powerful because we've been able to abstract all the technical complexity out into like something, a comic that any layperson should be able to read at the end of the day, right?
And there will be fun going through as well at the same
Absolutely.
time.
Yeah. So if anyone wants to check it out, you can go to, I think, apifirstworld.postman.com. Just do a Google search and they'll be able to find it.
We'll drop a
But
comment
yeah,
below this video. So,
perfect. Awesome. So I feel like we've also invested in like these kind of resources that simplify anyone's understanding of these kind of concepts.
hmm.
So it's really not that technical anymore. These are
Hmm.
like fundamentals that you need to understand technology in today's day and age.
Makes sense. Makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah, Vinit. So let's touch upon the core competency part of the roles, right? The reason I want to touch upon this area because every single company has a different competency framework
Hmm.
to define the role for the same.
Yeah.
And roles will anyway junior product designer, senior product designer, lead product designers, and
Yeah.
all, right? But the kind of labels they define for the different competencies is different.
Yeah.
From your perspective, for let's say senior product designer, what should be the responsibility, what should be the expectations for that role?
Yeah. This is a hot topic. I feel like I'll start with a disclaimer. I don't
Please.
personally, lend a lot of faith into titles.
Absolutely.
Everyone just sort of invents their own titles at the end of the day. They're a cool way to hire and like reward people. But I think what we have boiled it down to is a few key areas where senior ICs, in the loosest, definition of that
Hmm.
word, really differentiate themselves,
How?
from like juniors or like, folks who aren't at that level yet at the end of the day. First and foremost is, I think, by the impact that they are expected to create.
Hmm.
Um, Very often, as a product designer, you're probably going to be working on at a spec level. There's well defined problems for you to take up. Sure, you're digging a bit deeper and like getting more personal with like what kind of an experience a user is going through, but you're not necessarily contesting a business proposition, or you're not necessarily looking at like the macro level of how this capability adds value to Postman or any other product in the long term,
Hmm.
right?
True.
When at most senior levels, we expect you to have that kind of rationale at the end of the day.
Hmm.
We want you to be able to think business strategy. We want you to be able to articulate your design convictions against the trajectory of like your product or your business, and really be able to sell that idea at the end of the day. I'll give you very tangible examples.
Yeah.
Very often, this can mean that you're doing your own discovery to find opportunities and like pain points that might exist, or like how you want to go solve them. You're seeking feedback and alignment. You're finding out who the right people are that you should go to sell this idea, build conviction, validate, and
And then solve for it.
exactly 100%. So a lot of this is just in problem definition at the end of the day,
Hmm.
right? And I think the best senior designers that we have seen can have that kind of impact. They can take an end user outcome and do whatever needs to be done to actually ship that end user outcome at the end of the day. They're not bogged down by dependencies. Oh, I don't have an engineering team. Oh, I haven't convinced, someone, on the team. They're not like 100% sold on the idea.
Right.
Engineering doesn't want to invest the time into it. Product doesn't see the ROI of this, whatever, right? Like all of those are at the end of the day like excuses when it comes to these really, really high impact folks, at the end of the day. The second big area where we see seniors do this differently is with the level of autonomy that they display.
Okay.
Um, I think that it's no secret that like building great products is not a single person job. It requires a lot of collaboration.
A lot
The
of
bigger the team,
alignments.
yeah, the crazier this gets at the end of the day. And I think we really appreciate people who have the proactiveness in doing this without being told to do it themselves, by someone else. At the
Hmm.
end of the day, they're looking for signals from uh, org level, all hands, or like messaging, or like where the industry is going, etc. They're building their own
The
ideas.
direction can be any, let's say.
Exactly, right. And they're doing this all on their own volition at the end of the day, right? They're not waiting for like this to become a priority. They're not waiting for someone to tell them that this needs to be done, but they're like proactively doing this themselves. This also extends to the kind of activities that you're doing as part of your product development life cycle, right? There's no
Hmm.
set process that you need to follow because you're doing everything intentionally and going seeking feedback intentionally. You're not relying on like existing forums to seek that feedback. Sometimes you have to invent new ones. Sometimes you have to find stakeholders outside of your organizations. I don't know,
Right.
we've seen people like talk to investors in other fields just to build conviction on like a certain area. What are the different kinds of AI startups you're investing in? What's their positioning? What are you guys looking for? What does that mean for our positioning? So like it can really
Build up.
not
Yeah.
be bound by a set design process that we expect from like every designer at the end of the day. And the true
Makes
senior
sense.
designers really display that level of autonomy to go above and beyond when it comes to getting shit done, at the end of the day. The last ways in which seniors distinguish themselves is probably through the kind of leverage that they have in the organization. This
Okay.
means that they have spent the time and effort to build trust with
Hmm.
functional stakeholders, with leaders in the organization. Um, they've shown impact, and that's why people depend on them to
Yeah.
like ship great experiences. They've put their opinions out there, and that's why someone remembers that, hey, this person has a strong opinion, maybe I need to go talk to them. But they've been vulnerable. They've like put themselves out there, and over time built that leverage so that when when a senior, like when this senior designer for example says that, hey, I think we really should invest in this problem area, right?
Hmm.
The starting point is a place of this person saying it, they probably know what they're doing, and let's
Correct.
think about why this is a problem, etc.
True.
um a lot of times people think that this leverage automatically comes with your title or like the position that you're given, etc. I can say with full confidence that today if you join us or any other company as like a head of design, it does not matter. You have to build that leverage from scratch.
From
You have
scratch.
to
Yeah.
build trust with your team. You have to build trust with your heads of products, your heads of engineering, and you have to get to a point where people trust you to like take good decisions at the end of the day. And there's a lot of like soft skills that factor in to that kind of building leverage at that scale. So I feel like these are like the three things that really set people apart. Obviously it takes a lot of hard skills to help you achieve these three.
Hmm. Hmm.
um, you cannot build leverage,
Without
without
having
having, yeah,
empathy or
exactly, right.
yeah, yeah.
You cannot be autonomous if you cannot articulate and like communicate effectively at like a much larger scale at the end of the day.
And you can't have an opinion if you don't understand the user as well.
Correct. Absolutely. So there's a lot of like hard skills behind the scenes that we're talking about, but the cumulative end result of all of these is that we expect seniors to drive great impact both autonomously and with like high leverage across the organization. That's how we like to frame, how we distinguish seniors. A senior designer in Postman could be a product designer elsewhere, could be a lead designer elsewhere, could be a staff designer elsewhere. Again, like don't
Hmm.
really hold a lot of these, but if
But in that case, what do you look for when you are hiring, let's say, a senior product designer?
yeah, we assess for these three and like how you've shown it, proven it in your past experiences at
And
the end of the
and
day.
one competency that I just now recognize is when you say that it's not just a PM's job to identify the problem
Yeah,
statement, it's also up to the designer as well that
100%.
they find out the area that they want to work in and then just go for
Yes,
it, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
So if that's the case, then the curated process for you to hire a senior product designer might be different as well.
I think the way our teams are structured itself enables some room for senior ICs to come in and do this discovery themselves. For example, for the
Okay.
last 2 years or so, we have intentionally tried to stay away with hard couplings with product and engineering in the sense that our design teams own end to end user outcomes. Very
Mm.
often, to drive an end user outcome, it might mean working with multiple product teams, multiple engineering teams to get to that outcome, right?
Hmm.
But the design problem that you're working on is a relatively evergreen problem, it's a broad problem. Tomorrow, if company changes strategy, that problem is not going to go away. You continue investing in it, but maybe there's a different tactical approach, to
Yeah.
solving that problem at the end of the day. What this has provided is enough room for senior folks in each of these teams to have the room to discover and grow by themselves,
Right.
and find opportunities without being bound by, okay, what is that product team doing, what is that engineering team doing, etc. We expect design teams to be the best advocates for our users, and
Hmm.
if that's the case, then your ambit is pretty broad.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Help us understand how much importance you give when you're hiring a designer or evaluating a designer to have a technical competencies as well. Because so as we have seen the rapid growth of AI, right? There will be number of agents coming to your hand where you can do couple of repetitive tasks
Hmm.
in a one go,
Yeah.
right? So to create that kind of a different hand where you have a number of agents working for you,
Yeah.
you need to have some sort of a technical abilities to create that agents in the first place.
Yeah.
How much importance you personally give to the technical abilities to a design?
I think agent design is like a wildly new space. So I'm not like gonna, I don't have extremely strong opinions of that, but you're 100% right. Like, I foresee a world where these kind of skills are like ever changing, and maybe like hard skills like coding or whatever are not like the first thing you assess people by.
Correct.
At Postman, honestly, we never reached that point. Like we've always been, do you have the right fundamentals to understand a real world user pain point? Right? Do
Hmm.
you understand technology enough to know the place of APIs in the software development lifecycle? Do you understand the software development lifecycle well enough to understand the pain point that Postman as a product is trying to solve for?
Hmm.
If you know that, then everything else is like a learnable skill at the end of the day.
Right.
There are different ways we assess this as well during like our hiring. One question that I love asking people, and it's a really simple question, is um, if you were to explain what an API is to your grandparents or like your 5-year-old cousin or niece or nephew, right? How would you distill it? Right? How would you
Hmm.
simplify that abstraction to a point where anyone can understand it?
Hmm.
And these kind of like analogies are what I find extremely interesting in how people think about
APIs
technology and
and
problems.
hmm. Hmm.
Because if you can build the right analogies, it doesn't matter how complex a technical abstraction is.
Or how
Your head,
close it is to
exactly,
the. Huh.
your head is already sort of like boiling it down, breaking it up into simpler things that you can understand, and like
Right.
communicating it in that form so that you can, explore further, discover further. So I feel like that's something I over index on rather than like the technical like domain knowledge itself. um this can also vary wildly between different teams in Postman, right? If you're um in an extremely niche and technical space, let's say you're targeting like a very specific software architect persona, and there is the tooling for that persona itself is so narrow and niche right now that you just fundamentally need to understand like certain things. Like, do you need to understand like the open API specification format, why it was invented, where did it
Right.
come from, what kind of a problem does it solve, etc. Sure, like we might get more nuance in the way we sort of like ask those questions, but honestly not something I lend a lot of weightage to when I look for designers.
Makes sense. Let's zoom out a little
Yeah.
bit, right? And I want to ask kind of a personal question,
Hmm.
but at the same time, it's also boiling down to the competencies that a designer should have. Since you are there in the Postman from a very long time,
Yeah.
right? And the kind of a journey that you have seen for a Postman and for yourself is so different,
Hmm.
right? And nowadays, if we, not every designers, but if we see any designers in India, right, people are keep on changing the products frequently. Both has its own nuances,
Yeah.
right? Personally, what are the advantages that you have seen being with Postman for so long?
I honestly think that to drive real behavioral change for users with the product, you need at least like 2 to 4 years, and that completely depends on like your positioning in the market. How much of a leader are you? How
Hmm.
much do people look at your product to set the trend for like how this problem is solved in the industry, etc, etc.
Right.
At Postman, we've had the luxury of like being like the API platform. It's probably the largest user base, largest active users for like the longest time. And even then, if you have to fundamentally change the way a developer thinks today, you're probably going to need to invest 2 to 4 years in a problem in Postman. Otherwise you're not really seeing that play out,
Hmm.
at the end of the day. So I feel like the biggest value add for like longer tenures is, especially in the kind of products that we build, is seeing like having the satisfaction of like seeing that change gradually over time, and actually getting a sense of like what works at a macro level. At a micro level, you can talk heuristics, you can talk at like better design principles, etc, and sure, you can see that play out very quickly in like the usability of the experiences that you're designing, etc, etc. But like if we want to teach, for example, developers to be more collaborative when they build
Hmm.
software, that's a behavioral change that you will never be able to validate with like one release, two release, three release. You got to be in there for like the longer run. um
Hmm.
I think this also matters when we look for like senior designers in the industry as well. You probably need to have served long enough at a product place to have seen this kind of change, and only then will you be able to really get a gauge of like what is the impact you drove, right? Sure, you can
Hmm.
drive up numbers by 10%, etc. You increase conversions, retention dropped, etc, whatever. But where does your design skills directly attribute to like the kind of like change that you're driving for like your users?
Hmm.
And I think that's very easily distinguishable when you talk to folks who've had longer tenures.
Makes sense.
I don't think this is like a you know black and white situation. Like I feel like with product designers and like more junior folks, sometimes having shorter tenures but more diverse experiences can be valuable. For
Hmm.
example, being able to take a small problem and like recreate and try three different ways of solving it in three different organizations has its own merit. But again,
But
I feel
it's,
like
I feel it's rare as well.
it, sure, and either way, I feel like it peaks at some point, and beyond
Huh.
that, it has diminishing returns. And
True.
there's nothing like having served like 5 years in two companies, building two amazing products like that. That kind of experience is invaluable at the end of the day.
Makes sense, Vineet. I really enjoy the entire conversation. Anything that you want to share with our audience as a learning resources, can be book, movie, anything it can be.
Lots of amazing books. I think that like our team probably talks about in a lot of places. Creativity Inc. has been our
Mm.
go-to for a long, long, long time within the design team. I've had a lot of like personal learnings from, org design for design orgs, and like because my entire leadership journey was within Postman.
Yeah,
We had to sort of like learn on the go, and learn from our own mistakes. Um, yeah, I feel like most of my learning at the end of the day comes from conversations like this, conversations from other peers in the industry, and just learning what works, what doesn't. So, any
mm,
kind of forum that you can find where great product leaders, great design leaders are, there, probably go there, participate, ask hard questions. Um, I I think it's very important to not be siloed into your functional,
right.
communities. Like,
Specifically being a designer.
yes, you do not become a better designer just by sitting with designers. You gotta open yourself up to a very, very diverse audience of like,
Mm,
different personas, just to get a sense of like, what are all the people that we serve at the end of the day as designers.
right.
So yeah, that's probably like the best advice I can give at this point.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
And for you guys, any of you have any questions or something that you want to ask to Vinith? Let us know in the comment section below, and we'll get it answered with by Vinith.
awesome.
Great. Thanks, Vinith, for joining today.
Happy to be here, and hopefully, the entire audience of this has something to take away from the conversation. And yeah, happy to answer any questions folks might have as well.
For sure. For sure. Thanks.
Yeah,
Our main goal with this podcast is to bring insightful conversation to help you grow in your career by inviting leaders who are driving impact at scale. If you find this episode useful, make sure you subscribe because that only helps us to invite incredible guests for the future episodes. And in case you have any suggestions about who we should invite and what all topic we should cover, let us know in the comment section below. We are always listening to make sure we deliver exactly what you are looking for.